points that you make in your book, The Art of Everyday Ecstasy, is that we often think, well, ecstasy must mean it's either sex or somebody is swooning with ecstasy or having an out-of-body experience or a near-death experience. But you're pointing out that there are two kinds. You can have that kind of epiphany, but you can also have a kind of a flow with life where there is just an elegance, a gracefulness about every little thing.
Yeah, and the elegance, I mean, is actually to accomplish the maximum result with the minimum of effort. In other words, that's what happens when you're in a flow. Things happen, there's a synchronicity, and you don't have to make much effort. And that's what happens when you approach every situation with a relaxed body, an open heart because you're trusting, and an open mind, which is also peaceful, which means that your internal dialogue, your internal critic, is not all the time getting in your own way to tell you that you're doing things wrong, you know? And the ecstatic experience is actually amazingly easy to access. I would say that the ecstatic experience is as easily accessible as sleeping and dreaming. And nobody in this culture realizes that. We think that in order to reach ecstasy, you have to go to the Himalayas and study with a master for many years and practice ancient Eastern religions. Not at all. I say that we have been programmed to access ecstatic states from the moment that the sperm met the egg in our mother's womb. Because at that very moment of our conception, that is the moment, that was an ecstatic moment in most cases. And so we were conceived in an ecstatic moment, and then when we grew up in our mother's womb, in the moment of gestation, we were floating in the amniotic fluid, and as many, such as Stan Grof, have noticed, talking about the oceanic state that we experience there, it is a very blissful state. And then after the birth trauma, we do experience a very ecstatic life, especially for the first 4 years. Everybody knows that children are ecstatic. They're one with existence. They have no fear of the past. They're playful. They're totally welcoming of people. You know, it's very much a state that we go back to when we rediscover our ecstasy. So, you know, we are ecstatic beings. We just forget it as we grow up.
One of the points you make is that our organism, our body, has many different centers for experiencing different forms of bliss.
Yes, actually, these centers called chakra are, that's an ancient term from the Sanskrit that means wheel. And they're like energy bodies. They're like subtle energy fields that happen around the areas in our body that correspond to the endocrine system. And traditionally, we recognize 7 of them, although there are more. And they are like ladders of consciousness and energy transformation. And the first level is the orgasmic or sexual center. The second is having to do with our connection with our body and our health and our sense of balance, of flow. The third one has to do with our sense of trust with ourselves, our sense of putting ourselves out in the world and of self-empowerment, and also the adrenal glands, of course. The fourth has to do with our thymus gland and our immune system, but also our heart, you know. How do we explore our emotions? How are we related to our parents? How do we know how to love and to be receiving love? The next one has to do with creativity and communication. So that has to do with the thyroid gland and how we express our truth, and I call it the song of the soul. And the next one has to do with our sense of vision and insight, and with the pituitary gland, and I call it the what did I call? Oh, the full moon. And then finally, the crown chakra has to do with our sense of connection to the divine and our accessing, our developing our ecstatic potential. And this is the sky, this is the openness of the sky mind, as I call it, our Buddha nature, that in us which was before we were born and which will remain after we die.
So my sense from your work is that just by being aware that we have all of these organs of sensitivity and expression, subtle energies flowing through us, just the awareness of that, to appreciate we're more than just a skin-encapsulated ego or a piece of meat or some kind of a robot.
Right.
That awareness in and of itself opens people up to more joy in life.
Yeah, because you can look at how a culture responds and from which chakra a culture responds or a person responds. For instance, let's take love. Mm-hmm. Our culture, as far as love and sexuality is concerned, will mostly respond from the first three chakras: sex, the body, and the power. So you hear, songs that talk about, "You're mine, baby, give it to me," and "I need you and I can't live without you." This is all the first three chakra kind of level. It's the primal, lustful desire, belonging, depending, needing, mm-hmm. It's all the traps of the first three chakras, dependency. But then when you rise to the higher chakras, for instance, in the heart, you begin to connect to a much broader dimension, which is recognizing that love is not just, the possession of another human being, but it's actually something that is available for all beings, and then you develop compassion, passion with. You can put yourself in the shoes of another. You can live what they're living to understand them better, realize that they're your equal, that if you belabor their mistakes, you have to remember your own, and that there is a place where we are one, And
it reminds me of Freud. In a way, he started out his psychology saying the whole human unconscious is based on survival and fear of death and the desire for sex. And then his disciple Alfred Adler said, and let's not forget the quest for power. And then later on, other psychologists began to say, well, there's also love, there's also visionary experience.
Right, Jung said, yeah.
So now, the whole of Western psychology, if we include the transpersonal psychologists, the humanistic psychologists, seemed now to have a handle on the entire chakra system.
Right. And you see, that's the beauty of it, because
mm-hmm.
actually the whole chakra system has been completely remodernized by people like Carolyn Meese and Deepak Chopra. I know them both, and I
mm-hmm.
appreciate them both. And in a way, the dimension that I bring to this rebirth of the whole tantric map is the sexual, the dimension that teaches us how to connect sexuality with spirituality, mm-hmm. and which has so far been left behind, a little mm-hmm. bit. But the map itself is a fantastic map, because the teachings of Tantra are so great and so relevant for us today, because the root of the word tan is expansion. And another meaning of that Sanskrit root is weaving. Mm-hmm. And what it means is weaving the many contradictory aspects of our personality, our mm-hmm. different centers, into one unified whole mm-hmm. for the purpose of expanding our consciousness, you see? And that is nothing else than what we're talking about today when we say healing the whole self, mm-hmm. It's like the holistic approach is, you can't leave a part of yourself out, because sooner or later it will come back to haunt you.
Well, and I gather from your work and from the work of others that one of the fundamental ways to work with these energies is to visualize, to picture in one's mind the flow of energy from the top all the way down and circulating through and maybe around or in different directions between the chakras, so that there's a sense of fluidity and flow, and to be aware when it's stuck, because in the stuck places, if one has a sense intuitively, the energy is blocked here, then that's where we need to work on ourselves.
Yes, exactly. And so, to give you an example, one of my biggest challenges in life is mm-hmm. office work. Yeah. And so I often arrive in my office feeling that the world is going to fall on my head. The roof is going to fall on my head. This hasn't been done, and this. So I know what I have to do is I have to very much focus on my body all the time. I have to make sure I drink a lot, and I have to do exactly what you were suggesting, to breathe deep, and to be in a flow with my energy all the time, because as soon as I forget that, I start to move my energy to the head, and then I get tense, and I relate to the situation more from an unbalanced mental place, and I'm not in the heart anymore, not relating to other people from the heart place.